Welcome everyone to Treasurer Deb Goldberg and the Financial Literacy Task Force's first ever webinar from the State Treasurer's Office. So we're all making history today, everyone. Welcome. My name is Barbara Anthony. I'm the chair of the Treasurer's Financial Literacy Task Force, an honor that I greatly appreciate. And I am currently a senior fellow at both the Kennedy School of Government and the Pioneer Institute. I served as the Undersecretary of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation under Governor Patrick. Now, the purpose of this webinar is to provide all of you with an update on our comprehensive research effort examining the state of financial education in Massachusetts. The committee as a whole faces a number of challenges in making an impact in this field. Early learning based on research done in behavioral economics have helped to understand the best ways to improve financial capability through financial education, access, and opportunity. The task force has been asked to identify recommendations that are high quality, actionable, and have significant or scalable impact. The final task force report will serve as an action plan for the State Treasurer and the Economic Empowerment Trust Fund Board to implement an impactful statewide financial education strategy. Through their research, this task force is making sure that students, parents, and teachers have the tools and resources needed to be financially literate. There is a need to make the system work better, to encourage and incentivize more teachers to teach financial education. Now, you will hear directly from members of our task force who are presenting on their preliminary research and findings. But we also want to hear from you. At any time during this webinar, you who are listening and participating today may submit a question through the chat box on your screen. If you can, please indicate who the person is addressed to. At the end of all the presentations, we will answer as many questions as time allows us. But first, it is my great honor to introduce to you Deb Goldberg, the Treasurer and Receiver General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who will be starting off this webinar with some introductory remarks. Treasurer Goldberg.
Oh, thank you so much, and good morning to all of you. I am incredibly excited to be with you today. When we first created this task force, we were trying to figure out how could we include everyone in the most efficient manner, because I recognized long ago, but most particularly after the financial crisis in 2007, 8, and 9, how important financial literacy skills were to every single person here in Massachusetts, whether you were a child, an adult, a veteran. Everybody needs financial literacy skills to survive in this very challenging environment. So Barbara, I want to thank you and the entire task force for your innovative leadership, thoughtful analysis, and hard work to promote financial education. Providing our residents with these tools to make informed decisions regarding savings, budgeting, and borrowing money is absolutely essential to building a solid economy, long-term sustainable economic growth, economic security for everyone here in Massachusetts. It was this belief that caused me to create our task force, because I believed that together we could develop the most comprehensive programs and use the Treasurer's Office to outreach around the state and be effective. So we have done so under our Office of Economic Empowerment, one of the first of its kind in the country, and we hope that this is something that everyone will become involved in. Our comprehensive research effort, bringing together policymakers, teachers, bankers, and advocates, will create an action plan and a roadmap. And a critical piece of our research is engagement with each and every one of you. And therefore, that is part of the reason for today, because everyone has something to add. So many people have thought about, what if they had known this, or have tried something that was effective? So in the coming weeks and months, I hope you will continue to connect with us, share your ideas, share your expertise, whether it is in person or online, through our social media and through contacting us directly. I do want you to know that as part of our initial research, we developed subgroups to focus on key demographics: K through 12 students, college students, and adults. It is critical that we reach out and connect with millennials. I personally am so far away from being a millennial that sometimes I even don't know what age group that is, but I do know what their challenges are because my children belong to that age group. And they confront a new series of economic challenges in this 21st century. 31 task force members have committed precious time throughout this summer to play an important leadership role in this effort. Every single one of them is passionate about making a difference. In fact, during the last 5 months, the task force members and staff from the Economic Empowerment Office have devoted 500 hours to research and policy recommendations. And in November, the task force will present a final report to my office and the Economic Empowerment Trust Fund Board that focuses on specific implementation strategies. This report will serve as a blueprint about how to enhance the financial education of every resident across the state. So thank you once again for spending time with us today to learn more about our work. I look forward to hearing some of your questions later on in the webinar. And now I'm going to turn the microphone back to Barbara Anthony, who again, Barbara, I thank you for leading the group on this effort, who will explain and introduce the agenda for today and the different subgroups. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Treasurer Goldberg, and thank you so much for spearheading this terrific initiative. It's never been done before in the Commonwealth, and we look forward to the final action plan presented by this great task force. So the first subcommittee of the task force is the K through 12 student subcommittee, and that subcommittee is co-chaired by Todd Ostrowski, and he will be presenting next. Todd serves as the treasurer of Ludlow Education, the Ludlow Education Association, and he's a member of the Massachusetts Teachers Association Board. Now, serving as co-chair to the K through 12 subcommittee is Scott Gill. Scott is president of the Massachusetts Council for Economic Education. So welcome to Todd and to Scott. I'm going to turn it over to Todd now for the presentation. Take it away, Todd.
Thank you, Barbara, and thanks for having me on the call for the webinar, and welcome to everyone on the call. As a Massachusetts educator, I just wanted to add that I have been incorporating some financial literacy into the classroom and trying to get it more involved in the school and district that I work in since 2007. And as we heard from Barbara earlier and Treasurer Goldberg, the topic is just too important in today's world to leave out of the education for our students. We recently have lived through that great recession with its credit card debt, the mortgage crisis, the college loan and debt crisis, and these issues demonstrate the boom and bust cycle that is inherent to our economic system. The state of our economy requires citizens of all ages to better understand how the impact of their personal financial decisions affect them and our economy. The devastating effect of exotic financial products in the banking and investment industries and the transfer of responsibility for long-term financial and retirement planning directly to citizens are two historical examples why our Commonwealth needs to address the lack of financial literacy in our youth and take a leadership role in educating young consumers and assure they have access to quality, timely, accurate information prior to and when they must make financial decisions. The challenges that we've faced as we move through, financial literacy education currently happens in many forms and places around our state, including through interactions in formal kindergarten through 12th grade education, within the family structure, the community, and financial institutions. Yet much of the education is uncoordinated for the maximum effectiveness within the kindergarten through 12th grade learners. Many of these children are also growing up in a family structure that may not be financially literate. The people who currently provide financial literacy education and those that will provide it in the future need support and materials to keep them current with financial literacy concepts at different ages and stages of their lives to successfully engage them. Many organizations across our Commonwealth already have programs or initiatives underway, and the successes of these programs can help our young consumers. How this information is shared and how success will be measured based on relevant data and identified needs continues to challenge us. Getting the many organizations together to establish a coordinated system of financial literacy in Massachusetts is yet another challenge we face. We continue to contemplate what are Massachusetts' financial areas of concern and what will success look like. The opportunities that we have come across so far in our discussions, and we look forward to hearing from others and their knowledge and what they can share, that the earlier knowledge of students must lay the groundwork for the increasing complexity of financial decisions as our students age. With this in mind, the opportunities and ideas that we have worked through so far include building on existing programs, connecting existing networks and promoting new ones, promoting professional development, adopting national financial literacy standards, creating useful measurement tools to identify what success looks like, including knowledge, decision-making, or even application, encouraging public and private partnerships, identifying, emphasizing, and enhancing incentives for stakeholders, focusing on the family unit and life cycle events, and to use technology to connect people with the many resources available where they can exchange ideas, experiences, expertise, events, and programs related to financial literacy. Our next steps. We will continue to work on recommendations through more research and discussion during our weekly meetings. We recognize the good work being done in our Commonwealth through many of your organizations and the organizations across the state to address financial literacy issues. We would be remiss if we didn't consider your questions, comments, and your ideas as we develop our final recommendations for Treasurer Goldberg. Thank you.
Unmuted.
Thank you very much, Todd. And now we're going to hear from David Florine. David, who is a friend and colleague of mine and is a former executive vice president of the Massachusetts Bankers Association, will be presenting on behalf of the college subcommittee on our task force. Now, the college subgroup is led by Saul Carbonell, who is the assistant vice president at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, and Ann Bookman, who is director of the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at the McCormick Graduate School at UMass Boston. So let me turn it now over to David Florine. David, take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Barbara, very much. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon on behalf of the task force. You just heard some of the issues and opportunities facing those at the K through 12 level. They're diverse and they're not unique regardless of your urban or rural. It's very important that we build a strong foundation in financial education and financial understanding, regardless of what choices high school grads make about furthering their formal education, regardless of what direction they choose to go. Before we focus on the slides and why financial education at the college level is important, it's critical to understand that the demographics of the college student are very diverse. First, we may not realize it, but there's close to 600,000 college students in Massachusetts in the year 2015. Now, not all of them are in the traditional four-year college. That 600,000 or 591,000 something number represents across the spectrum, including adults, those even seniors that have gone back or that are studying. But it's a large, broad, and diverse range of students. The profile is diversified age and socioeconomic background, and really emphasis on a broad socioeconomic background. While many students are enrolled in typical four-year programs, many are at community colleges, adults taking courses part-time, online, and elsewhere. Personally, as a lecturer at Northeastern University and at UMass Amherst, I can tell you from my own experience, my students have come from across the country and even across other countries outside of the United States that are enrolled in our universities. It's a vastly different environment than years before. Again, it's no secret, but Massachusetts has the highest percent of its adult population that have a four-year degree than any other state in the country. Close to 40% of the adults have a four-year degree. That is remarkable. It also tells us how many more that we need to work on. As Todd explained before me, many high school students are not exposed to any significant financial education experiences. It's often localized with no standard curriculum and often part of an elective course for a selected group of students or perhaps an after-school program. Likewise, levels of parent awareness or confidence in explaining personal finance is very mixed. Some are very comfortable in talking about money and their personal financial. Others clam up and don't talk about it at all. And that's a real issue. And then finally, there's the whole student debt upon graduation that's had so much deserved attention. The average in Massachusetts as of last year was about $28,500. So let's talk about two transition points. High school to college, deciding where, what to study, and how to pay. And then once you're enrolled, what are the opportunities to learn personal finance? Let's talk to the transition issue at first. Much of the conversation about college selection, at least for the traditional four-year schools, is about personal fit, geography, do I like the buildings, programs, city versus country, big versus small, etc. Those of us that are parents that have gone through that know the college tour process all too well. Finances often come later or aren't really discussed enough. Financial aid is often mentioned, but often, too often, it arrives in the form of loans, when students seldom really understand and parents are often reluctant to discuss candidly, because once their son or daughter gets into a school or school of their choice, it's all about getting the sweatshirt and moving on and not always talking about what's it going to cost when they're done. Just a brief anecdote. Many years ago when I was deciding to go to college and had three choices, and two of them were UMass Amherst and UNH. And I still remember to this day that I ended up choosing UMass Amherst because it was $998 a year, yes, a year, and UNH for an out-of-state student was $3,300, and my parents said, is it really worth that much difference? And that was a lot of money back then. So you do need that conversation. Similarly, those that are at a community college or other schools often have many other financial responsibilities and may not be aware of the long-term implications of taking loans for programs or courses which they do not complete or do not help them achieve the employment and compensation necessary to repay the loans and continue to support themselves. Let's be very clear. We are not advocating that students choose courses and programs based strictly on what their future employment opportunities are or may be. However, we do believe there needs to be much more transparency regarding the likely long-term benefits of courses and certificates chosen, and assurances that the course credits funded by those loans can be transferred to a four-year institution or a valid certificate program. Likewise, there should be more transparency on financing college costs, including a more transparent, a better financial aid shopping sheet, focus on simplifying the FAFSA process, very interesting one for sure, and being more candid about what the loan repayment terms are likely to be, and not waiting till April or May of the senior year when you have to do an online FAFSA checkoff list and you go through it and then you go, oh my. Again, this is not to discourage students from seeking higher education. We want to encourage it. but it's a desire for more transparency and accountability. Second brief anecdote. Several years ago, we had a student from a university here in Boston that worked as a part-timer with us, with me. And she was so terrific, we hired her. And several months after she came to work for us full-time, she came into my office one afternoon, closed the door, and said, "Can we talk?" I had no idea what she wanted to talk about. But she knew that I was involved in financial education. She had done some work for us, and she said, "You know, I'm going to start repaying my loans." And I had no idea I had $60,000 in loans, and I'm scared to death. And she was bright. She is bright. She's moved on, and she's done well, and she's advanced herself. She's advanced her degree. But, you know, someone as bright as her didn't really have that much of a clue. There are thousands others like her. We need to help them. Finally, and this is important, we need to be creating many more opportunities for training teachers, college counselors, and others in financial education so they become more conversant in and comfortable with discussing these issues. In many instances, those we ask to teach financial education may not feel that confident in their own financial situation. So let's switch now to once they're enrolled in college. Our focus thus far has been on state institutions of higher education only, the UMass system, the state universities, and community colleges. Our private colleges are very important too, but the vast majority of the students at our state schools are Massachusetts residents. And given the limited resources and the ability to influence this process, this has been our priority at this time. Colleges have a captive audience. We can leverage the orientation period and process as initial teachable moments, but we ought to seriously consider an online financial education module that all students would have to complete, perhaps for a credit to graduate. For example, and this is not unique here, Iowa State University 5 years ago, at the student's request, implemented a mandatory one-credit course that they all must take to graduate. It's funded in part by student fees. Something to think about. There are many topics to cover and ways to present the materials, but among the priorities are better preparing students to understand their responsibilities and options for loan repayment, learning how to budget current and future expenses, exposing them to various resources that can help them to be more financially stable and secure, such as the VITA site, expanding resources in financial aid and career counseling offices. What are our next steps? Currently, we've got 11 working recommendations under review, including several that intersect with the other task forces. We are not acting as silos. We're acting because this is a continuum that moves around depending upon where students and adults are, the demographics and the lifestyles. Factors under consideration: the best entry points to present, the optimal, most cost-effective methods of presenting the materials, the need for significantly expanded teacher-faculty training, including resources to achieve these goals, access to college savings products. There's still a work in product. There's still a work in progress. So we really, really do want your input. And finally, I'll just close with, for several years, I ran a financial education internship at UMass and always did exit interviews. And every year, the students always said to me, "Mr. Florian, why is it so hard to reach people? We never figured it'd be so hard to do so." And I think that really sums up what we're all trying to do, is how do we reach people when they need it to help. Thank you, and we look forward to your input.
Thank you very much, David. That was a terrific presentation. I'm very excited to hear all the recommendations and the work that your group has done. We are making great progress here. Thank you. And it's always been a pleasure, by the way, to team up with you when we've done our dog and pony show at some of the colleges around Massachusetts on financial literacy. So hope to do some more of that in the future. So now we're going to hear from the adult subcommittee, and the representative of that subcommittee is one of the task force chairs, George Blount. George is the manager of strategy and research at John Hancock Retirement Plan Services, and he's presenting on behalf of the adult subcommittee on our task force. The task force is led by George, who you'll hear from in a moment, and Sylvia DeHaas. Sylvia is the Senior Vice President of community impact and engagement at the United Way of Pioneer Valley. So welcome, Georgia. We look forward to hearing your presentation. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara, for having me. And once again, thank you, Treasurer Goldberg, for initiating the task force and allowing us to do this great work. On behalf of the adult subcommittee members who have contributed their expertise and their research to help in the adult segment, I present our initial findings. So let's start with what we know today about the Massachusetts consumer. The liquid asset poverty rate is 35.3%, meaning almost a third of the consumers in our Commonwealth do not have enough savings if a financial hardship were to occur for 3 months, and that's definitely something that we have to consider. In addition to that, the unbanked rate is 5.8, and the underbanked rate is 17.2. Unbanked meaning consumers that do not own a checking or savings account. Underbanked, for clarity, meaning consumers who own a checking or savings account, but then also use an alternative financial service as part of their daily activities. I think what's interesting to consider there is that's 23%, almost a quarter of consumers are facing some type of challenge using our traditional banking system. And if you were to look at a recent FDIC report, the alternative financial services industry accounts for $320 billion annually in transactions. I think it's important to also mention that when we start to talk about adults in general in Massachusetts, if you peel back the layers, there are certain segments that are more at risk. I mentioned an aggregate rate of unbanked and underbanked of 23%, but if you were to look at the low to moderate or lower and lower moderate income, that unbanked and underbanked rate is 78.9%. And those are for people making under $30,000 a year in household income. I think if you were to also look at first generation immigrants, we have the additional factors of learning a new language as well as acclimating to a new financial system, which will make that an even more difficult process to use our traditional services. I think when you also look at parents, one of the things that you are going to recognize is additional burden placed on the family dynamic as a result of the adults in the household going through some type of financial stress. But then you also have the impact, the family dynamic impact on the dependent, and we have to look out for that as well. I think if you look at other groups as well, if you were to look at the women demographic, I think it's easy to say, and I don't think anyone is unaware of this, that with a certain inequality in wages, this problem is exacerbated when you focus on that group as opposed to others. And we can say the same thing when we look at seniors, where seniors have the additional burden of increased financial responsibilities as they get older. That process is not easier as you get older, and they become more at risk for predatory services. And I think I would also use that to piggyback the plight of veterans who are targets for some of the predatory services because of their ability to have consistent income and then also several movements throughout their career. So a key finding of the FDIC research is that if you look at unbanked and underbanked, they found that when they asked consumers why they use some of the alternative financial services, they were under the impression that it was a traditional financial service. So the awareness of what constitutes traditional financial services versus alternative financial services is definitely an issue that we can address. Which leads us to an opportunity. I think it's an important aspect of the adult task force when we looked at our entire segment to focus on actionable activities, and the rates that we have indicated for both unbanked and underbanked has highlighted an area that we think we can actually move the needle on and actually have positive change. And in doing that, we want to stay in alignment with the Financial Literacy and Education Commission, FLEC, that was formed in 2011, in their strategy to start early for financial success. And as part of that strategy, they have segmented all financial products into 5 categories, which makes it very easy for people to understand the financial products that they have at their disposal and how they should be best used. That information can be found on a website called mymoney.gov, but the premise of the program is called My Money 5. And the 5 categories of financial products that they have outlined are earnings, borrowing, saving, investing, spending, and then protecting your financial resources. I think it's important as a part of this committee that we take the steps to create an awareness for traditional savings and checking account, other savings account, and other traditional services among Massachusetts consumers. But then we also target public education and awareness on the use of traditional financial services among the Massachusetts consumers who may be disproportionately impacted by the alternative financial services. We feel that an awareness in traditional financial services at places of employment and financial institutions can mitigate the use of alternative financial services while preserving the earnings that our consumers are bringing in every single day. In terms of our next steps, I think it's an important part of our group to mention the impact that behavioral economics has on the adult segment. As a rule of thumb, the expertise and the experiences that people gain over time are most pronounced when they are an adult, in which time they would be inclined to use those rules of thumb to make decisions as opposed to what they may not know. And in doing so, we feel that this approach relies on a theory that people make better financial decisions when they are provided with the information as they are making the financial decision. It is accepted among some circles that this is the best practice for improving financial capability overall. And a just-in-time strategy usually requires the dissemination of targeted information, tools, signposts, any type of resources directly to consumers who are about to complete a specific financial decision. Our approach complements the traditional path of knowledge acquisition, but then also supplements it with the inclusion of a just-in-time strategy of awareness at the time of financial decisions. We think that the main idea is that we have developed a foundation for a recommendation to create awareness of the traditional versus the alternative financial services. And we're open to feedback as we move to the tactical phase of the recommendation. So at this time, we're going to open the floor to questions, and thank you again, Barbara and Treasurer Goldberg, for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, George, for that great presentation. Your group is also doing phenomenal work. Also want to thank again Todd Ostrowski and Dave Florine for their presentations. And you know, it's clear that no matter where we are in our life cycle, financial literacy plays a critical role in our well-being. So now this brings us to the question and answer portion of the webinar. And for that portion, we will be led by Elena Van Tassel. Elena is the Deputy Treasurer and Executive Director of the Office of Economic Empowerment in the Treasurer's Office. So Elena Van Tassel, please.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you to everyone for joining us on today's webinar and submitting all your questions. If for whatever reason we are unable to get to your question today, please email us at the address on your screen. First, we have 2 questions for Treasurer Goldberg. Treasurer, can you read off your questions and respond to them?
Number 1, why do you think financial literacy in Massachusetts might have fallen behind some other states? Well, I think that's actually extremely complex question. Historically, Massachusetts has been so far ahead in education that some very basic principles have fallen by the wayside. But in addition to that, with the structure of our government and the question of creating unfunded mandates for local communities by asking them to add on to their educational programs at the same time that their class sizes are growing and their other financial burdens are increasing, creates a disincentive for teaching financial literacy from a very young age. In addition to that, culturally, the state has changed significantly. So some of the programs that were developed early on may not meet the needs for the population, the different people who are arriving here, taking into consideration their cultural differences and their specific needs, which I think we really highlighted a great deal in the discussion around adult education. It is very, very critical in the just-in-time thinking that we take into consideration the cultural backgrounds of the people who we are trying to help learn how to work within the financial system. So it's a very, very complex issue, And the last thing I might mention was the ability of one person or one office to coordinate all of the efforts that so many good people are making, whether they are in the for-profit world or in the nonprofit world, and develop the best practices like we're planning to do here, and then make that information available to the broadest base of people throughout the entire state. And so I think that we are on a precipice of considerable change, with the understanding throughout the Commonwealth and the country, because I am participating in the National Treasurers Association Financial Literacy Task Force, and they are actually asking us to share what we are doing with them. It's a nonpartisan issue. It is about economic stability. It's about economic growth and helping people get ahead and get where they need to be in life.
Great. You want to read your next question, Treasurer?
Well, the next question is, what is an example of a public-private partnership that brings financial education to schools? So we actually are working right now on 2 public-private partnerships, among others, but one is the expansion of the Credit to Life fairs. From the very beginning, I was extremely impressed with the impact that the Credit for Life fairs can have on teenagers prior to them going to college and taking on excessive debt. What we've learned from the pilot programs on the Credit to Life fairs is it is life altering. We've had young people give us the feedback that even their parents would say to them, you're applying to school? Pick one. Worry about paying for it later. And yet, after experiencing a Credit for Life fair, they are saying to themselves, I won't be able to afford to pay those loans. So we're making sure that in high school, rather than the young lady, Dave, who came to you after college and said, oh my God, we're getting them that information by them experiencing a day-long program where they have a salary with they think is a good salary, and a job, and then a car loan, and then a new iPhone, and then adopting a pet, and then having to pay for all those things, and then renting an apartment, and then finding out at the end of the year they're bankrupt. And so what we've done, along with the Division of Banks, is for this year, 20 new Credit for Life fairs across the state, and we are going to continue expanding that program, working with a public-private partnership to fund and make that happen, because the results are remarkable. The second program that I'm excited to announce is that we will be creating our pilot program for a college savings plan, which is us working with the Mass Educational Financing Authority, but also with private funders to have a small but significant program, small in terms of the dollars, where every kindergarten child in this state receives a college savings account. Now, there are several things that we can do through that account. A, it creates aspiration for college or vocational and technical training for the child and for the child's family. But equally as important, it is a vehicle for us to be able to use in order to teach financial literacy skills around savings, banking, good interest versus bad interest, and the whole range of issues that this child from kindergarten through 18, 19, 20 years old and their families will be able to learn. So I'm very excited about that program, our Credit for Life fairs, and more programs that we will work on a public-private partnership with as the recommendations come out of the task force and we solidify the kind of things that we will be doing.
Thank you very much, Treasurer. Next, we have some questions for Todd Ostrowski, representing our K-12 subcommittee. Todd, can you read off the questions you received and respond to them?
Yes. The first question is, do you see financial education as developing into a graduation requirement for K-12 students? During our subcommittee conversations since April, many of us feel that this would be very important, but based on some of the financial issues that arise with getting money set aside for creating a requirement in high schools, we don't see it necessarily becoming a graduation requirement. Some districts do in the state currently have economics as a financial requirement. We see it as a developing program in schools, kind of like we just heard from Treasurer Goldberg. The Credit for Life fairs offer an awful lot for the students before they graduate and go on to college. Having these programs available in schools is the first step, and maybe many years from now, it could be a graduation requirement. But based on how districts currently operate, each district in our state, for all the towns and the cities, the high schools and the superintendents get to determine the graduation requirements. So there would be an awful lot of work to do to standardize that throughout the state. But I think the move here would be to get a class and promote classes or Credit for Life fairs or a certain number of hours perhaps for students before they graduate to have been exposed to some kind of financial literacy before they graduate. So I don't know about having it as a requirement, but as a proponent for financial literacy, I know our subcommittee has talked about this, and I'm very curious to hear what some of the other organizations around the state would think about moving forward on that or other ideas they have. We just don't think it's possible at this time to make it a requirement based on some of the information that I just shared with you. There was a second question, I believe. And the question number 2 is, what role do you see after-school and out-of-school time providers playing in providing high-quality financial literacy programs? Informational education settings could provide great opportunities, especially during the summer months. This is a great question, and it was one of the things that actually in our committee we started thinking about, because it isn't just the educators that are teachers or paraprofessionals in a public school setting that have access to the K-12 crowd of students. And we came to the conclusion that we do need to reach out to our church groups, the Boy and Girl Scout groups of the state, the Boys and Girls Clubs in the state. All of these organizations see the students, many of the same students, but they have the opportunity to discuss certain elements of financial literacy outside of the school day, where sometimes students just need to get away from the math, reading, social studies, and sciences that are required by the state and the Department of Elementary Education to move forward with for the graduation requirements in the schools. And I think we do need to look at the outside organizations, especially during the summer months. We have the libraries and librarians. That is a great resource that we have talked about as well, where students can get involved in financial literacy. And we do want to move and discuss this more on our subcommittee. And I love the question because it does open up the other side, where educators and teachers in Massachusetts have a little bit of a reprieve, where there's some help outside to build this into a stronger element for our students just outside of the school walls. So thank you for that question. We are still looking at that. And again, we do look for your ideas and other questions that might move along the outside sources, such as those that I mentioned. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd. Next, we have some questions for David Florine, representing our college subcommittee. David, can you read off the question you received and respond to it?
Certainly. Thank you, Elena. First question we have is the task force looking at for-profit schools? The answer is yes, and we're still, I mean, there are a lot of factors in there. The question is it the sort of well-known four-year schools like University of Phoenix, which is sort of one direction. The second would be, are we thinking in terms of for-profit schools, the more localized schools where people go to pay maybe several $1,000s for training in specific professions? And I'm just picking out things like whether it's hairdressing or ITT or others. You know, there's a whole range. And I think we also have to look at what is our ability to shape and influence some of the options. Now, for example, on the matter of for-profit schools and what can we do, some of it may require legislation. And in Congress, there is legislation pending that would require all non-community college institutions to uniformly describe financial aid information using a financial aid worksheet considered similar to the shopping guide put together by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, whatever. And there are a lot of options. There are a lot of issues to look at. Clearly, the debt side of it, what are you getting for your money, et cetera. But yes, it's on the table. There's a question about exactly how much we can do on that, and that's still very much a work in progress, and we'd very much like to hear input from those of you on the webinar this afternoon. That's why it's here. That's why we're here.
Thank you, David. Finally, we have a question for George Blunt representing our adult subcommittee. George, can you read off your question?
Sure, thank you. What are the challenges associated with bringing financial education to new Americans? One, I love the question, and I'll answer it in a way that talks about the challenges to new Americans, but then also addresses Americans overall. One of the biggest challenges for part one would be the assumptions used in education. I think it's very important to consider that financial education programs in general make a couple of broad assumptions that aren't very flexible. One, that capitalism is the way an economy should go. Even though there are 5 capitalist economies around the globe, we choose one that's a free market economy, but you have to understand that the definition of capitalism is different around the country, especially if you look at the definition of capitalism in Japan or China or India or Germany compared to the one in the U.S. And as a foundation of financial education, that's going to have some differences that have to be explained, and it's actually not. I think you also have to look at a second challenge, which is the cultural experience associated with financial education. I think in general, financial education in the U.S. and in Massachusetts, but all over, is more of a green light philosophy. I mean, more of a yellow light philosophy. And what I mean by that is, a green light means go. A red light means stop, but a yellow light can mean you slow down, you speed up, you didn't see it. Maybe anything based off of what you see. And I think that financial education has that type of variability to it. And if you look at the cultural experiences, and I were just to talk about maybe Asian American population as an example, or even Hispanic, you can't make a literal translation of the English language and how we depict financial education into Spanish and expect that to go across maybe the 20 or so different cultures that are present in the Hispanic demographic. You can't expect it to have the same cultural experience as the 20 to 30 cultures that are represented in the Asian American cohort. So I think that's difficult. And the last challenge is very simply the goal. I think just in my expertise in retirement, if you think of the ideology of retirement by different Americans, but then also by different cultures, really when it comes to financial education, at the end of the day, what are you becoming educated on and what is it preparing you for? Well, if your goals are very nondescript or you have competing ideologies, it will make it very difficult for financial education to be impactful. So I would look at those 3 challenges: the assumptions in education, the cultural experiences among the participants, as well as the goal at the end as what challenges would be associated to bringing financial education into Americans.
Thank you so much, George. We do have time for one more question. I'm going to bring it back to David. David, could you read off your question and respond to it?
Certainly. The next question is, what are colleges and universities doing now to provide financial education to students? It's a great question, and it's pretty diverse. Let me just speak very briefly to the state universities, colleges, and so forth. We know that UMass Amherst offers some programs. They've tried a couple of semi-campus-wide initiatives with modest success. We know that some of the state universities, and I'm only picking two out here because I know what they've done, and there are many others are doing, but Salem State and Bridgewater have developed some pretty interesting programs. Likewise, several of the community colleges, again in Northern Essex and Holyoke and a couple of others I know in particular, have been working very hard on this, and the presidents of those universities are very actively involved. I think what everyone is really trying to figure out is how can you bring all of those really, in some cases, very innovative and very active programs in a sort of bring them to all of the college campuses, regardless of what their level is, and try to sort of leverage what's there to make it available for everyone. That's really the challenge. But there are a lot of things going on. Likewise, at some of the private universities, they're working on their own as well. And I will say that the task force has done a terrific job, the staff of the Treasurer's Office, with some interns this summer, and really trying to do an inventory of what's going on. Because first, before you can sometimes figure out where you want to go, you need to know what you've got. And we're pretty close to wrapping that up in terms of developing a good inventory and try to build on the best.
Thank you so much, David. That wraps up the question and answer session for this webinar. Again, if we did not get to your question, please email us at the address on your screen, and we'll be more than happy to get back to you. Barbara?
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, Elena, and I want to thank everyone for joining this terrific historic webinar on this very, very critical and important subject. Thank you, Treasurer Goldberg. As I said earlier, you know, what you're doing here is really, it's going to be transformative in terms of Massachusetts and the state of financial literacy here, because we do have to do a lot better than what we've done. And with you in the driver's seat, we are. So again, to repeat what Elena said, if you have questions, it's on your website, and please don't hesitate to ask.
Well, I want to
Treasurer?
thank everyone, because this is about making a significant difference in people's lives. And if income inequality is considered the issue of our day, even by Janet Yellen at the Federal Reserve, which is a pretty conservative group, it's very clear that it is something we need to combat, and financial understanding, financial tools, knowing how to get what you deserve and manage your life from a very early time is going to make a difference and allow people to bridge that gap and have successful, happy lives in this state. And so if we can do that through this work, and I thank every one of you on the task force and every one of you on the webinar for your interest, your input, your concern, because we need to do this together, and we will make a difference. So thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to hearing more from you.